You are listening to the Night and Day podcast, featuring the interview archives of Western New York music writer Thom Jennings. Thom has interviewed some of the biggest names in music and entertainment, and now you can enjoy these never-before-heard interviews. Here's your host, Thom Jennings.
Hello, everyone, and I am your host, Thom Jennings. This is a rarer than it used to be episode of Night and Day, my interview archive podcast. I recently received a couple of cool things since our last podcast episode. I received an award from the Niagara Falls Music Hall of Fame, Lifetime Music Supporter Award, which really just meant a great deal to me, and really that's the impetus for this particular episode today. At that ceremony, I met Frank Fracassi, and I'll be sending Frank a copy of this particular interview once it posts, but we're just finishing up. I'm not sure when this will post. I'm assuming it'll post, but maybe, beginning of 2024, end of 2023. But Ron Altbach, who is a member of King Harvest, he was being inducted into the Niagara Falls Music Hall of Fame the previous year. So reached out to him, was able to secure an interview. Interview was about an hour long, and we touch on a lot of different subjects. I honestly haven't listened back to it, so I don't know if there's, maybe I'll have to listen back to see if there's anything I need to edit out. But I figure I'd just run the thing unedited in the hopes that there's nothing horrible that's said. But either way, sadly, Ron left us early this year, February of 2023, and what a guy to talk to. Said I'd been speaking with Frank about this particular interview, and they did a tribute show for him, and I was kind of reached out to some people to see if they'd maybe want to hear it, and nothing really happened there, and I guess that's mostly my fault. So here it is. Great interview. Hope you enjoy it. I love the comments. If you enjoy the show, go back in the archives, and if people listen to this episode, who knows, maybe I'll post some other stuff that I have. I got some pretty cool interviews that I've done in the last year with everybody from like Joe Bonamassa to Sammy Hagar, people like that. And there's always some interesting stuff. But and the other thing I wanted to mention too is that I just received a grant from the Genesee Orleans Arts Council to do a 6-part podcast on the life of Vince Welnick, the late Vince Welnick, who was a member of originally with the Tubes, then in Todd Rundgren's band, and then in the Grateful Dead. So I'm excited to begin work on that over the next year. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be on my social media channels and all that kind of good stuff. But in the meantime, please enjoy. And it's a long one, folks. So strap yourself in. Enjoy an hour-long conversation with Mr. Ron Altbach, formerly of King Harvest.
Hello?
Hello, Ron.
Yep.
How you doing, Thom Jennings?
Hi, Tom.
Thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
I guess we'll start out with, just so I don't forget, I know you performed with Huey Lewis back at Artpark. I want to say it's 8 or 9 years ago now. I know when Doc was still alive.
No, I'll tell you what. It was 12. It was 12 years ago.
Wow, 12 years ago.
No, I'm sorry. 2012. So 10 years ago. Yeah.
And we'll cut it in the middle. You thought 12, I thought 8.
What happened was we had scheduled we did a reunion in Alcott, the band, the King Harvest, and we played. We scheduled that, and actually the background is that we hadn't really, the guys in the band hadn't really seen each other, not as a group, for a long while, and then we were asked to do. What the hell's his name? TJ Lubinsky, is that his name? The guy who does he produces shows for PBS, so kind of oldies shows. And we did an oldies show at a casino in West Virginia, but it was actually felt like just outside of Pittsburgh. And this was in 2010, I think. And then, it felt good. We hadn't played together for a long time. We only did one song, Dancing in the Moonlight. What a surprise. But it was as if we had never stopped doing it every night. I mean, it was remarkable. So we decided, okay, let's do a reunion. Let's do one more concert together as a group. And the people the local, the town supervisor and Newfane and the county legislator who's now the supervisor, John Syracuse. Everybody wanted us to do it, and the main promoter was my friend Dan D. I don't know if you know Danny, but Dan is a businessman, lives in Alcott, and he's always just always promoting big party. He loves big parties, and he loved the band, and so anyway, so we agreed to do this reunion, and it was an actual concert. It wasn't just playing one song. We had to actually think about how were we going to actually pull off, a couple hours of music, and so we went through our old set list and then recruited a couple local musicians, the Stoll Brothers band, drummer, guitar player, and bass player. But they're terrific musicians. We know them for a while. And we rehearsed. And when we set up rehearsing, we were going to rehearse in Dan's garage before the concert. The concert, I think, was the 8th or 10th of July, something like that. And then, but it turned out that Huey was playing at the at Artpark on, I think it was the 3rd. And Huey, we were all quite good friends in college, especially Doc was very friendly with Huey, as was our guitar player, Eddie Talea. And Huey didn't have a band at Cornell when we were at Cornell. I didn't even know he was a singer, frankly. I knew he had a harmonica, and he was supposedly a good harmonica player. But if he and his stage presence and Doc's stage presence, if you actually studied them, were very similar. I'm not saying he copied Doc, but Doc was Doc was at Cornell anyway. He was like a real rock star. So I called Huey and said, hey, listen, everybody's coming up, and you're playing at Artpark, and it would be really nice for Doc. Doc's had a kind of an up and down life. It would be really nice if he could just come and sit in and play Dancing in the Moonlight. And Huey said, yeah, well, you should too, Ronnie. So we decided to do it, and we went up and did sound check with him, and then we did it. It was a lot of fun, actually. It was very uplifting for Doc, I will say. And I put this into perspective of, 5 months later, he was no longer alive. So wow. These final months, the summer months of 2012 were really a very nice time for him to. We did the Huey thing, and then we did a interview on WLVL.
Yeah.
Do you know that?
Yeah, the Lockport radio station.
I don't know if you've seen that or heard it, but it's actually, I'll send you a link if you want.
Yeah, no, I'd like to check it out.
Because it was really fun. This is a band that has 1,000 stories, and maybe 10,000 stories. I don't know. But anyway, so we did that, and then we did the concert. And the concert was, there were like 3,500 people. Alcott only has a population of 300 or something. I mean, it was pretty significant. The town was kind of shut down, and everybody had a good time. So, yeah.
Yeah, the Cornell thing with Huey Lewis, I can't remember. I think I stumbled across that around the time you guys performed out there, because I'd interviewed Huey before the show. And very nice guy. I could see where he would invite you both up. He just seems like a real musician's musician, but that was a pretty magical moment, even in the history of Artpark. There's a YouTube video that was actually shot by one of my friends, and it's gotten well over 1 million views of that performance.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Huh. Well, yeah, it was fun. It was fun, and it felt good, right? It was a really good feeling, and that's the thing about Dancing in the Moonlight. It just feels good, It's a very good. First of all, it's a wonderful song. Sherman Kelly wrote a great song, no question about it. And then I think the King Harvest recording is really, unusually good, actually, unusually special, I would say.
Yeah, I read. It's weird that the timing of this thing, because I think it was about 3 weeks ago, and I'm a vinyl record collector, and that Dancing in the Moonlight LP has just been has eluded me for years, but I still wanted a copy of it. I mean, I've had the 45 for a long time. I used to be a mobile disc jockey, and we played Dancing in the Moonlight. But yeah, I found this pristine copy. I mean, the record sells, whether it's horrible or not. It goes for $60-$70 now. So I found it for $5. I was just super excited. But
it's a pretty. I mean, it was, So here's the story. The story is, so I went to Paris. I went to Paris in 1967 to study classical music, and then the guys one by one. Eddie came over and Rod came over in '69, the summer and fall of 1969. We formed a band with a French, quite a big star actually, named Jacques Higelin, and we formed a band because we saw a sign for a rock concert, a rock contest, like a rock and roll contest, right? Band contest. And so we thought, well, shit, we're the, who among these French people playing, pop music are going to be a better rock band than we would be. So we formed it. And Eddie and I just loved the band, the band, right? And especially the Brown album. And on the Brown album, there's that song, King Harvest Will Surely Come. So we thought, well, so that's a good name for a band. Let's call ourselves King Harvest. So we did. And then we joined. Then we entered the contest and we won the contest. It turns out that it was all bullshit. There's no real prize, but it was kind of a beginning, right? So then we did a lot of just gigs and clubs and small music festivals around France, and then in the summer of '71. Around the summer, I guess, the summer of '71. Doc wasn't part of the band in the beginning. But he was in New York, and he and I had always been very, very, very close friends. And I'd heard that he was not doing great, and there was some contraband involved. And so I invited him to come over. I said, "Look, we just did this music for we did the Eddie and I, and under the name King Harvest, actually did the music for a French film that represented France in the Cannes Festival in 1970, and we got a little bit of notoriety out of it. We played at the Whiskey and Cannes, and Ringo and Maurice Gibb, and kind of various celebrities came around saying, "Hey, we love you guys. We want to produce your band, whatever." So anyway, I invited Doc to come over. He came over. We did a bunch of shows. We did a bunch of shows, and then we recorded Dancing in the Moonlight in the fall of '71. And then we got a manager through kind of a circuitous path, but a guy in England who was Donovan's manager who wanted to manage us, and he set up a showcase at I think the Speakeasy or Ronnie Scott's. I can't remember, one of the two. And we got there and we did the sound check, and everybody was all enthusiastic, and all the record companies came. And then the guy that we had as a drummer at the time got drunk, and we just didn't play well. And that was kind of the end of King Harvest for a while. I came back to the States, and Rod came back to the States, and Eddie and Doc were on this sailboat out in the Mediterranean, taking tourists back and forth to Africa. I don't know if it was tourists, or I don't know what the hell they were doing. But anyway, so then in the summer of '72, Jack Robinson, who was the producer of the record, or one of the producers, who produced the record with us, he was a good guy. He was a music publisher in Paris, the American guy, and he just loved it. He just couldn't believe that we couldn't get somebody to put out the record. So he came to America with the recording, and it just went around to radio stations and record companies, and eventually he got a small company called Perception Records to lease the song Dancing in the Moonlight and the album, which Eddie and I and others had done, way before Doc came into Paris. So we had this kind of mixed bunch of recordings that had been done at various times in an album, plus Dancing in the Moonlight. And so that's why it's not a great album. It's a horrible album, but some of the songs are quite good. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't find it. I mean, I enjoyed listening to it a lot. I mean, you could sort of tell. I think this wasn't uncommon in the '70s, where a lot of times you'd have one song and then you kind of try to build an album around it, and it didn't have that kind of cohesive feel of a record from the same session. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it wasn't. It wasn't cohesive. I will say though that some of the songs are good, and this was the other way around. We had an album and then did a hit song that got stuck into the album. We should have done another album, but we weren't together. These guys were on this boat. So then Jack Robinson, he got some disc jockey in like Seattle, where he was from, to play the record, and people started calling in. I mean, it was an instant. It was an instant thing, actually. And so Perception Records they had one girl, Jeannie was her name. I wish I remember her last name, but they had a one-person record promotion department. And so Jack was out there kind of promoting directly to some radio stations. And those days you could actually get a program director to listen to a song. You obviously can't do that anymore, but you could back in the early 70s. And so the song started playing. So then suddenly it becomes like this, phenomenon. It starts growing, and it's on radio in the summer of 1972, and it's like getting up into the charts in a couple of locations. And so Jack called me. I was giving a piano. I gave a piano recital, like a classical recital, on the West Coast at a small college called Humboldt State College. And I got in my rented Pinto after the concert and turned on the radio, and there was Dancing in the Moonlight, and it was like me. I mean, it was our Dancing in the Moonlight. So I called my mother back in Newfane in Alcott, and it was like late at night because I was on the West Coast, and she said, "Oh yeah, your friend Jack has been calling trying to find you. He said that you have a hit song." My parents were immigrants from Austria. I don't know if you know anything about my family, but the idea of a hit rock and roll song was not like that. Wasn't like. That wasn't part of their cultural experience.
Yeah.
And so she said, "Oh yeah, you should call your friend Jack." So I called Jack the next day, and he said, "Oh yeah, we got to find Doc and Eddie. This thing's going to be a huge hit." So in the end, I don't know how old you are, but
I'm 56.
In the old days. Okay, so in the old days in Europe there was a U.S. paper called the Herald Tribune. Now it's called the New York Times Paris or something, but it was the only real American paper that was distributed widely around the world. And at the back page there were personals, so you could put in there, Tom, where are you? We missed our appointment. Like people put all kinds of shit. So we put this ad in and said, Doc and Eddie, wherever you are, if you find this call, dancing's a hit.
Wow.
And so these guys like stumble into this cafe in the south of France, having gotten almost shipwrecked, and they were having a coffee, and there's somebody had left a copy of the paper, and they read this ad, and so that's how we all reconnected, and then we came back, so we reconnected, and we all moved to Alcott. That was in the summer. That was in the fall of 1972. We moved to Alcott, and then we didn't know what to do really. So we got this manager who was another big mistake on our part. But so we didn't really have a record deal, although the record that we had made was signed to Perception Records, and they of course wanted to sign the band, and Doc and I made the classic stupid mistake, honorable but stupid, which is we thought, well, because we were being romanced by every record company at that point. Here we were with a big record, no record deal, right, and a pretty good band actually, and Clive Davis, and I mean everybody wanted to sign the band. We decided we'll stay with this little company. They're the ones who brought us to the dance, and we'll stick it with them. And of course, then they went bankrupt and didn't pay us one penny for the record, and that was the end of it. But so we have all these stories.
That's crazy. You did tour. Though I think you toured with Sherman Kelly, if I remember correctly, right? Didn't he come along? On an initial tour?
He came along. So that we invited him to come to the band, and he came and he lived up in Alcott with us. And the spring of 1973, we did a limited tour. We probably did 15 dates, and that was it. And then after that, so then we kind of stopped for a while, and then let me think about this. And then Eddie, Rod, and Doc and I came back to Alcott at the kind of later in the fall of 1973. But by then there was no action. Sherman went back to Ithaca, and it was just the four of us. And we played as a 4-member band. And I played the drums, except that on Dancing in the Moonlight, I played the drums and the right hand of the piano. But we were a really good hard-ass band at that point. We were a kick-ass rock band, and we played down at the Owl's Nest down in Alcott, and lots of clubs around. We played in Brockport and here and there and here and there. But it wasn't very glamorous. And we kept doing that through the spring of 1974, and then that was kind of we made a couple more records. We made a couple more recordings for Perception, but they weren't good. And it was just kind of we did an album for Perception. I don't know if you've heard, you maybe not, but if you're interested in this shit, I can see there's an album called The Lost Tapes, which was we recorded it. We recorded quite a decent album for Perception, but it's never released. And then we met the guys from the Beach Boys, and then we decided we weren't going to keep going as King Harvest. I was going to I did move to Iowa to teach music at a small university, and for a couple months. And then I left and went toured with the Beach Boys, and then one by one I got the other guys to come and work with the Beach Boys, and then we did another album in California in the early spring of 1975 with the idea that we would then open a tour for the Beach Boys, and then political considerations took precedence, and we weren't able to open the tour. A&M didn't really like the album. They didn't promote it, and there's some real hit songs on that album.
Wow.
But they didn't like it that much, and so that was it. That was the end of the band.
God, there should be a book about this. I mean, there's so many twists. I mean, even just because I remember reading about even the origins of Dancing in the Moonlight. A lot of this, in fact, when I posted on my Facebook feed that I picked up a copy of this, somebody said, "Oh, that was written about the Moonlight at Olcott Beach," and I was like, "No, I'm pretty sure the guy had something to do with him and his girlfriend." It was like a bizarre story about them getting raped or something out in
yeah, that's a
Europe.
true story. Yeah, not in Europe. It was in St. Croix. So yeah, Sherman. We all had a friend. We had another Cornell friend who owned a club down in St. Thomas, and a couple other people. And so they were down there, and they were on a boat. I wasn't there. They were on a boat, and Sherman was sick, or got seasick, and the girl got seasick. They swam into shore, and they were just basically going to sleep on the beach. No problem, except for a bunch of locals came and beat the crap out of them. I mean, left them for dead, raped the girl, multiple times apparently. And then, so the guys on the boat couldn't find them. And then they went, next day they went to the local hospital of the police. Nobody was reporting anything. But of course, he was there in the hospital kind of not being treated. And eventually they got him out in a private jet and flew him to someplace, I think Florida, I'm not sure. And then, so what he says in his description, if you read it, is that he was kind of dreaming of a life where people didn't beat each other up, and he wrote Dancing in the Moonlight. Yeah. So then he recorded that song with a band called Buffalongo, which was Doc Sherman and Wells Kelly, who's one of the great drummers of all times, and a guy named Larry Hoppin, who eventually became the lead singer of the Orleans, and they recorded it. Sherman was the lead. Sherman was the singer. It's just not a very good recording. It's not a good version. It's not pop. It's kind of cooler than cool, but nobody gives a shit, Yeah. So then Wells came to Europe, where I was, and he decided he wanted to live, with me and my friends and stuff, and join our band. And then he said, "Hey, my brother wrote this great song. We should do it." So we did. We started recording it, and we started playing it all the time. And then Jack Robinson heard it. And the interesting thing that Jack did was, which kind of makes the record, or a lot of it, is he to that little piano introduction that I played that lower down, octave lower, and he said, Ron, try to play that up a bit, it'll tinkle. And he was right. It just makes you hear that on the radio, and then you know what's coming.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great recording. The mix, everything. It's just it's brilliant in its simplicity, but there's a lot going on that song.
Eight-track studio. Doc was just it was a very rudimentary studio. Doc did the vocal in the stairwell because there was no echo in the studio. Wow. So they got the echo by being in the stairwell. And there's you'll if you listen to that. I will send you the link because it's fun. But as a percussion instrument, we used a toilet brush. There's a lot of stuff on there. Yeah, but it's a good recording. It feels good.
Yeah, and then Wells, I guess he had kind of a tragic ending, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he OD'd.
Was he? I'm trying to remember because I remember reading the story.
He was on tour with Meatloaf.
He was on tour with Meatloaf. Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I knew it was somebody that was famous. I think it was even was it near the same place that Keith Moon had the overdose, or is my memory faulty?
I don't know. I blanked the whole thing out. It was such a stupid way to die. I can't remember the details. I don't remember the details. He'd been on and off drugs, and he'd been pretty clean for a long while, and then just made a mistake one night.
Wow. Yeah. That was even when Meatloaf was kind of flying high. But in terms of a drummer, he had a great career too. He was a very in demand drummer right up until he passed away.
He was a great drummer. I've played with a lot of drummers and heard a lot of drummers. He was a great drummer. He was a great musician. He was inventive, and he was funny, and he had a sense of humor playing, and he was just fantastic. But unfortunately, now it's almost 40 years since he passed away. Yeah.
Yeah, very sorry. I can't imagine what it's like to lose a friend, especially to something like that. Unfortunately, these days it's a lot more common, but
yeah,
it's so tragic when you got somebody who really is, doing well and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and plus we all, we weren't. None of us were immune to trying things back then, and you realize how close everybody could have come to a stupid ending. He did, unfortunately. Yeah. Doc was a drug guy too. Doc never could quite get out of it. Yeah, he had some very down times.
What did he do? What did he do for a living post? Did he stay in the area? I think he stayed in Olcott and everything, didn't he?
He stayed just for a while. He stayed in Olcott for a while. Then I can't remember exactly what, but then I got them all to come to California. So another great King Harvest stupid decision. When I joined the Beach Boys, I immediately was befriended by and befriended Jim Guercio. I don't know if you know that is, but Jimmy Guercio owned a place called Caribou Ranch, and he was the producer of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but he got famous as a producer of Chicago. He was the manager and produced all the first 10 Chicago records.
Oh.
And a great guy, great musician. And he loved Doc's voice. Who wouldn't? And he loved the music that we had put together to do this album for A&M. We hadn't signed with A&M, and he said, "Look, I'll sign you to CBS, and I'll produce the record." So I invited Doc and Eddie and Rod, and we went out to Caribou for a weekend to meet him, and he was, he just couldn't be. He wasn't gonna beg us to be the producer. He was the biggest producer in the world at the time. And the guys decided they wanted to stay with a guy named Jeff Barry, who's also a good guy, a great songwriter, who was going to produce the record for A&M. The issue was we had this manager named Jerry Purcell. May he rest in peace. He was a good enough guy, but his big claim to fame was he managed Eddie Arnold, so he didn't have any clue as to what music was, where it was in 1974, 75, 76. You know what I mean? He was a good manager. He was a tough guy, tough Italian guy, He had a place called Paparazzi in New York, lots of rumors about him. And he convinced the other guys in the band, you don't want to go with this guy Gercio. I've set you up at A&M. And so we stayed with A&M, and it was a complete failure.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's like you guys were just on the precipice 3 or 4 different times.
Yeah. We were smart enough to fuck it up each time. I
mean, you seem to have carved out a pretty decent career. I mean, I just even recently I've seen you're doing a lot of that classical stuff too. So you've been able to kind of still at least make a living with music. I mean, that's
no. I don't. No, I haven't actually. I stopped making a living with music. Then basically after I left the Beach Boys, I had a record company. In New York, in LA, a small record company. I think we did great records, all R&B, and then Gercy and I decided to work with a group called Sailor, which was an English group that had a lot of success, no success in the U.S. And it was a fantastic band. The main songwriter is a guy named Phil Pickett, who then. He went on to write songs for a lot of people, including he was part of Culture Club and wrote Karma Chameleon. But he's just a great songwriter. And so that was after the Sailor stuff, though. I didn't really. We changed our company from a record company to a video and music company, and then we started making small films. And then in the around late '80s, I got out of it entirely. And in the early 90s moved to New York to be in the financial industry. So I haven't made a living as a musician for a very long time, but I started giving annual piano concerts in around 1985 or so. And except for COVID, every year I work up a new program and have a few hundred people come and let them listen to me, and it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, it may sound a little kitschy, but I mean, your last name, Altbach. I mean, is that your given name, or was that because you liked Bach as a? No.
That's my family name. That's my name.
I mean, you play Bach piano pieces, I assume, right?
Some. I mean,
Some?
I'm kind of thought of more as a player of Schubert and Chopin, but yeah. And look, I'm a good pianist. I don't know if you've listened to any of those.
Oh yeah, no, I watched it. I was. It's so interesting because you mentioned that sort of tinkling intro at the beginning of Dancing in the Moonlight, but just watching you play and everything, it's interesting. It's like, I don't know. I many years ago I interviewed Carlos Santana, and he talked about this universal tone that instrumentalists have, where you hear Carlos Santana's guitar, you recognize it. You hear Clapton's guitar, you hear Bill Payne, for example, from Little Feat. I'm a huge Little Feat fan. I recognize Billy's playing, and you have that same kind of. There's a certain thing about your playing that's very distinct, which is really cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Did you see the? There's a video there with Mike Love and a couple others about the song Lady Linda. Did you see that?
No, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, check that out together because so I was up at Al Jardine's place in 75 or 76 and he said, well, we should write a song together. So I said, yeah, I got this idea. And I had this idea of using a Bach chorale as a theme. It's the what's the name of it? It's like Jesus, Joy of Man's Desire, or something like that.
Oh, I know the one. I know the song you're talking about.
Yeah. So I started playing it on the piano, and he starts singing. Anyway, we had a huge hit with that song with the Beach Boys in England. It was never released in the United States as a single. In England, it was top 10, and it was so popular that I was over there with Gercio, and we went backstage at a McCartney concert, and his wife Linda was still alive then, and Jimmy said to Paul, "Hey, Ronnie co-wrote Lady Linda," and we didn't write it about McCartney's wife; we wrote it about Al Jardine's wife. But he just started singing it to him, McCartney. I mean, that was pretty cool,
Wow.
Right? So yeah. I mean, it was a big hit in England. Anyway. That was the last real writing I did, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Oh man, as I said, it's just this story. It's got so many layers to it. It's almost a shame there isn't a book or a documentary involved, especially with all those connections with the Beach Boys. You got the connections with the guys in New Orleans. But I interviewed John Hall. I think it was a month and a half ago. What a sweet guy he is too, man. My God, just activist and became politician, but still performs. But
they were. I'll tell you what. They were a great club band. I don't know how they were in concert because they were so athletic. It was hard. But they were a great club band, I thought, anyway. Orleans. They're just super musicians. Right? All of them. And another tragedy. Larry killed himself, hung himself.
Yeah. It's I hate to say this, but it's almost like there's this kind of weird curse that sort of floated around the band, because you think about what happened to Sherman Kelly to write that particular song, and then what happened to his brother, and then all the kind of weird things that happened with the band in terms of not quite making right decisions in terms of record deals and working with different people. It's almost like the curse of the Moonlight or something. It's a fascinating cautionary tale, but man, it's
I agree. It's a fascinating tale. We always used to say it's more interesting than it. We'd rather have it not be quite as interesting.
I can only imagine. It feels like out of all these guys, you were the one that kind of had the best head on your shoulders, and you had to pivot to the financial services industry, but at least you made it out alive, and you're still playing, and you're still coherent and all that good stuff. You're still above the ground. But man, this business it's killed a lot of people and broken a lot of dreams.
It's it's I'm lucky, and I've had a good life, and Eddie and Rod and I are still absolutely best friends. And Rod was in Alcott this summer visiting, and he'll probably be up next summer again. And there's something about a band. It's like it's even better than a family.
Yeah,
because it's we don't have to talk too much with each other to know what each other are thinking. And especially musically, especially Eddie and I would be it'd be hard pressed for me to think of being able to join another band and have that same kind of communication, that same kind of like unspoken communication with another guitar player or bass player or whatever. And that's why a lot of bands don't. Some guys who are like superstars, like you think of Skunk Baxter or whatever. Guys who joined big bands and became part of the Eagles, or Joe Walsh or something. They seem to integrate from one band to another band to another band.
Yeah.
But I think the other side of that is people who are like the band, and they just played together so well that how could you replace one of them? You couldn't.
Yeah. And there was a whole nother tragic. Those guys. I interviewed Amy Helm, Levon's daughter, and I just remember talking to her, and because there was years where he just was destitute. He was just driving around in station wagon. He had no money, and how can you make recordings like that to the extent that he did with all those records? But I don't know. I think Pete Townshend's biography and Roger Daltrey's. I'm a Who fan as well, and they were saying they didn't make any money till the mid-'70s, till they signed that big deal for the last 3 records after Keith Moon died. And before that, Townsend was the only one who made money because he had the publishing, and
he was the writer.
And he was the writer. So
it was a very unfair system.
Yeah.
And then some bands solved it by just sharing authorship, which was a smart idea.
Yeah.
As opposed to competing to see whose records are going to get on the record, whose songs are going to get on the record, which is it was like a what do you call it? Not Animal House, Animal Farm.
Yeah, I mean that's what broke up Foreigner. I mean Foreigner, Mick Jones was exerting himself and trying to get more of the publishing as they got bigger, and Lou Gramm eventually got pissed off and left. But yeah, the business.
Okay, so here's another little. So Mickey Jones lived in Paris for a while, and he was a session guitarist, and he backed up Johnny Hallyday, who was the big kind of Elvis type star in France for all those years. He's no longer alive, but he was huge star. I mean, huge star. It all seemed funny to us because it was like, yeah, he was a star, but he was in French. I mean, how much rock and roll. Anyway, but Mickey was his guitar player, so I got friendly with Mick, and when I moved to London, the beginning of 1972, after King Harvest had this horrible experience at the Speakeasy, and we weren't going to sign a contract, and I got tired of. There's drugs there was no future. It was clear that there was not much of a future anyway for me. And I didn't think there was a future for any band if everybody took so many drugs. It's just defeating, right? So I moved to London with my girlfriend at the time. And then I became a teacher at Transcendental Meditation. My brother had introduced all of us in the band to Transcendental Meditation in 1968, 69, and we all did practice TM, although there's no real synergy between TM and drugs, so they were backsliding. But even at the end, I mean, even Doc once in a while would still meditate. But anyway, so I had this great place in London, and somehow I got friendly with Mickey through a guy named Ronnie Bird. Ronnie Bird was another French rock star. He lives in New York now, and he was a big star, and he knew everybody. He introduced me to Mickey, and Mickey used to come by my place, and I had these two. I had I think if they were Thai or I don't know, they were very exotic girls living like as roommates. They weren't my girlfriends, but they were really pretty. One was a very successful model, and the other one was even prettier. And Mick fell in love with one of them and married her. Her name was Felicia. So there was at one point in the early 80s maybe or late 70s here in New York, Mickey was living in New York, and his wife's name was Felicia Jones. And I haven't seen Mick in a long time because he divorced her and whatever. But yeah. So at one point when Foreigner was just forming, let's think about this. Dancing in the Moonlight was a big hit, 1973. Foreigner was kind of forming, but it was before Foreigner, so it was Gary Wright, Mickey, and I don't remember who else, but
Spooky Tooth, right?
Well, it was after Spooky Tooth. It was called Wright's Wheel or Gary Wright's Wheel. Or something. Yeah, it was post Spooky Tooth. Free Foreigner. So, and I went over there because there was some kind of thought that I might join the band. It wasn't a serious thought, but Mick and I were friends, Gary and I were friends. There was a spiritual thing and blah 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 blah. But my view was, well, shit, King Harvest has the #1 record. I'd love to join your band, but I have a band, right?
Wow.
So,
wow.
So yeah. So then I think the story that Mick told me was, or Gary told me, that was Mickey had this vision for Foreigner, but they wanted to rehearse for a long time, and I guess I can't remember what their manager's name was, but he paid for them to live in a place here in the United States and rehearse for a long time before they did their first tour. But yeah, big success.
Wow, that's crazy. So you're friends with Gary Wright too, huh?
I was friends with Gary. I haven't seen him for a long time.
Yeah.
He lives in Palos Verdes. He had a good career after his solo career, because then after that period of 73 or 4, then he had those two big hits, right? Of course, I can't remember the name of them. He had two huge hits.
Dreamweaver was one, and then
Dreamweaver.
I'm Alive or something like that.
Yeah. And it was and it was early on in tour. It was kind of walking around the stage carrying a synthesizer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
It was so we did there was a Beach Boys show in Cincinnati, Three River Stadium, and Gary was the opening act, and then Peter Frampton was the second act, and the Beach Boys, and it was fun because we hadn't seen each other for a while, and here, I mean, he was doing fine. I was kind of a side man to a big, pretty big show anyway. It was a fun show, and then I saw him. I used to see him in L.A. once in a while. He had a son who was also a musician, and then we just kind of actually the other tie-in is that in 1978, Mike Love and I started a record company called Love Songs, and we raised a bunch of money from German investors, and one of the ideas was to do it. We just thought that Doc had such a great voice, right, and he should do a record, and I got Gary to produce it. Never came out, but it was just kick ass. It was really, it was really something. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah, I heard he wasn't doing well. I can't remember who I interviewed, but they said he might. He was supposed to go on tour. I think he was. I saw him with Ringo. Man, it's got to be 10, 12 years ago now too. Just a great performer. And I got to interview him. He was just a super nice guy.
Yeah, the obviously Foreigner was, unbelievably successful, and then then he had blonde hair, and he kind of became a rock star. But when he was a session musician, he was just a really good guitar player. Anyway.
Yeah, Mick said he loved Buddy Holly, and you could tell he has that same kind of riff sensibility. It's that those 3-4 chords. If you just play them right, I mean, it's just great stuff. I mean, it's Buddy Holly's whole catalog.
Yeah.
But wow. Well, so do you live in Olcott now?
I just left Olcott so we're up there usually in July and maybe part of June, July, okay. August, and just came back yesterday to the city. I'm going through culture shock because we live in an apartment in the city. It's hot, and then in Olcott we live right on the lake. Next summer you have to come over.
Oh, dude, I'd love to. I'm serious. I mean, if you're ever looking to write a book, I would. I mean, there's so many stories to tell here. Yeah. It's just. I mean, I don't know. We'd probably just have to do, 10 or 12 1-hour sessions just trying to flesh everything out. But man, there's so many tentacles to this story. Yeah. And I said even before I interviewed you, I've just read a lot about the band, and just, I don't know. It always fascinates me when you have those connections, you know what I mean? Like the Huey Lewis thing to me was like, well, how the hell is Huey Lewis? And then it turns out that he had all this other stuff going on, and I didn't know. I thought Dancing in the Moonlight was a hit first, and then they built the record around it. But
no,
that's crazy too.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, instead of actually doing it right, we had a huge hit, and then we had a second single that I co-wrote with Doc called "A Little Bit Like Magic." And maybe it wasn't a great record, but it was a pretty good record. People loved it, and it came out, and I remember we were on. This was during that mini tour we did, and we were out in St. Louis, and I don't know. Well, yeah, you're not that young. It's at some point in the old days, at TV stations used to sign off at night.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they would play the national anthem, and then you'd see the flag, and Well, that night they played a Little Bit Like Magic with the flag. Wow. Yeah, it was like we thought, wow, and it was like came into the charts at number 53 and then number 42, and then it just disappeared. We didn't know what the heck happened. It turned out the record company went out of they just went bankrupt. They closed their doors.
Yeah, and crazy.
another great King Harvest opportunity.
Yeah, well, I've talked to a lot of guys that same type of thing has happened, and it just underscores the importance of having the right management, promotion, and record label support. I mean, it's a different landscape now, obviously, because you've got social media and all kinds of different outlets. But still, if you're going to make it, you still got to have a publicity team that's going to get stuff out for you. We learned that we were well-educated idiots, basically. Well, you're musicians. I mean, that's not. A musician is a musician. They're not a publicist. I had this conversation with a good friend of mine not too long ago because he was asking me about all these people I work with and how do I get to interview these people. I said, well, the best publicist for an artist is one that doesn't really like the artist. Because they don't become enamored with them. Yeah. They can handle them in a way that's very businesslike. But you don't want to have somebody represent you that's filling your head with stuff. You want somebody that says this is what we got to do, and those are, it's weird. But it seems contradictory because again, you'd want to think that a publicist would be a big fan, but I think that most artists, at least the ones that I work with, I think they've kind of come to that realization that you just need somebody that is going to give you an honest opinion. That's going to say, hey, this song isn't going to make it as a single, or this is what we got to do to promote the album, blah blah blah, and not get caught up in all the nonsense. And it sounds like to you, I mean, I may be wrong, but it sounds like you ran into situations that I would approach the exact same way. It's like if I got a record company that took me to the dance, I was raised to be loyal to the people that got me where I needed to be. So I don't fault you for that. In fact, I think that shows that you're a man of integrity. But unfortunately, in business terms, it probably wasn't the greatest business decision.
Right. So Doc and I both asked our fathers. His father was a wonderful guy named Leroy, and who built himself a fortune. And he built it himself. I mean, he really was a terrific guy. My dad was a doctor. I mean, if you ask people around Newfane and Alcott, my dad helped create the hospital there, and then basically delivered thousands of people, from 1944 till he died in when did my father die? 91. And anyway, so they both fathers said the same thing. Well, you can't just leave the guys who helped you build this thing. Yeah,
of course, I agree. I mean, I'm of that generation. It's not like that anymore, though. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like old man cynical, but people don't. There's no loyalty like that. Somebody would just be like, "Oh, well, thanks for getting us there, but we got to look out for what's best for us." But I don't know, man. I mean, at least you can sleep at night, right? I mean, I feel like, I mean, there's probably some value in that, knowing that you made a decision. You made the kind of decision that it's do unto others as you would want to have done unto you, man. I mean, I totally respect that.
Yeah. Having said that, though, the King Harvest was a good band. It was just a good band. Like I said, because we knew each other for many years at that point, and there was something that glued when we played. We weren't the best musicians. We weren't like Arlene's. Those guys are, like I said, they're like athletes. They can play anything. No. But we created a really good feeling on every song we played, and people responded, and when we played live, people just really liked it. And then, but anyway, it was what it was. It was nice to have that. It was nice to have that experience of brotherhood. It's like being on a team, I guess, that wins the championship or almost wins the championship, or part of. I wasn't in the service, but I imagine if you serve with people, in dangerous situations, you build that kind of a bond. We built a bond, and it was we didn't love each other all the time, but it was something I wouldn't want to have not done in my life. You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah. I think you impressed. You mentioned way earlier in the interview about Huey Lewis's stage presence and some of his approach, even musically. I think you guys were definitely part of his DNA. I mean that. Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah, you could see it. That was why that performance was so much fun, because the two of them kind of trading back and forth.
Oh yeah.
Versus, I mean, it just was so natural.
Oh, the smiles. I mean, you can't. I don't know. You can't fake authenticity. I mean, you can sound polished as all get out, but you can't fake authenticity. That was a great moment. I mean, I don't know. I go to a lot of live shows. Like, I can't even tell you. It's got to be thousands. But yeah, those are moments that you just, I don't know. You just don't forget because it's so rare. Somebody just pops up on stage, a couple old buddies playing a song and just having just enjoying each other's company.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looked like, right? It was just, and everybody was just having a good time.
Yeah.
Playing a good tune. So anyway, well, listen, thank you for. I've kept you on the phone for an hour. But
I appreciate it, man. Honestly, this is I'm really excited just because I as I mentioned before, I was a mobile disc jockey. This is 35, 40 years ago. And there was a core group of 45s that I used to play consistently in these local bars. These weren't dance clubs. I mean, these were bars where people would come and, have a good time. And Man, I remember your song, Lee Michaels, You Know What I Mean, Sanford Townsend Band, Smoke from a Distant Fire, just some of these really great songs from these great bands. And it was just a part of the soundtrack of my life growing up, man. I love that song, and I thank you for being a part of it.
So do you work full time for the paper? What is
No, I'm a special education teacher. I teach history, social studies. So,
oh, good for you. Yeah. That's a nice thing. That's great.
Yeah,
Williamsville.
Yeah.
Williamsville. Huh.
Yeah,
good for you.
Done that for a while. It's the music stuff. Said it just kind of fell on it. They were doing a concert series in Lockport like 15 years ago.
Yeah. The Bridge series.
The free series. So it turned out they didn't really have anybody on staff who had the background knowledge on all these classic rock bands, and I was like, well, I can write. So I was doing political op-eds in Medina at the time, and it just got to the point where it was so divisive. I wanted to write about something I enjoyed. So I've been doing it part-time for 15 years, but man, I've got to talk to just about everybody I've ever wanted to talk to. It's been
that's fun.
It's been incredible. Oh, it sure is. I mean, the stories are amazing, but that's what I said. I mean, you're I don't know, man. The King Harvest story to me is just one of those ones that's just so fascinating.
I recently helped somebody start a company that's going to launch in a couple of months, but it's called Voice Vault. And basically what it is the ability to tell a story and then easily record it and match it with a picture or just a story, and then put it in an organized album and then keep it in your vault forever.
Yeah.
It's kind of a cool thing. It's mostly for seniors, but Rod and I have started to populate our King Harvest Voice Vault because we have all these pictures and all these stories, and it's not video. It's just, and the thing is that I don't want to. I mean, none of us who are now in our late 70s necessarily want to be remembered looking like we're in our late 70s.
Right.
We like the way we looked when we had the stories, when we experienced the stories. So anyway, I'll show it to you. But next summer, I'll keep your number, Tom. And next summer, I'll invite you up. I have a boat up in Alcott. We can go for a sail.
That'd be great, man. I'll tell you that voice vault thing. It's my mom passed away 6 years ago now. I wish I'd had more recordings of her voice, but I remember when I was studying in college, they did the FDR as part of the New Deal. One of the projects he had was to get narratives from all the slaves before they passed away, and it's like, man, people don't think about that stuff. We assume that those stories and everything are going to be kicking around, but I think that's a great project. It's great.
No, we started it because the fellow who's actually founded it worked for me long years ago, and his father died, and he realized he didn't have anything on tape. He didn't. Same thing. What's your email address?
It is ThomJennings721 at gmail.com.
Okay.
Are you coming up for the induction ceremony on the 17th of November?
I may. I'm not sure yet because I just heard about this. I didn't actually know much about this. There's a guy. There's some guys in Niagara Falls who work for a company called Sevenson. Anyway, Mike Elia's company. They build ports and they do environmental remediation. And they are the ones who nominated me to do that.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I actually wasn't very involved in it. And then he called me the other day. He nominated me last year. And then he called me and he said, well, you weren't accepted, Ron. And I said, that's fine. I'm all good. And then he called me like a week ago. He said, I got good news. You're going to be inducted. I said, well, that is good news. That's nice. That's an honor. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's cool. They're nice people. I mean, Bruce Wojcik is a friend of mine. I've known him for years now and covered him a lot. And it's a nice little organization. But hey, somebody honors you. You gotta thank them. I mean, it's a nice thing.
Yeah, I said the Thurman brothers. I actually saw them play in Alcott last summer.
Wow.
And they're funky. I like them.
Yeah, they're good. They're really good dudes too. I mean, they're just good people. I've interviewed them for a feature as well, and just I don't know, man. I said I've been very blessed. And we have a very rich musical history in the Niagara Falls area. Even with, I mean, I grew up in Rochester, but that's why more of the Foreigner and Lou Gramm and Duke Jupiter and all those guys that were my bands. But
you were too young for what the hell is that called? I'm thinking about. They had a song called "Don't Put All Your Eggs in One Basket." Otis and the All Night Workers.
No, I mean, I think I've done a feature piece on them because were they the ones that were the inspiration for Otis Day and the Nights, or maybe that was
supposedly, yeah. But they were, they were fantastic, man.
Yeah.
And then there was a band called Ronnie Dio and the Prophets, and then that became Dio. I mean,
oh my gosh, that's right. Yeah, because he was in Cortland, right?
That's right, and he transformed himself from this kind of R&B band to this monster, heavy metal guy. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy, man. I keep forgetting about the Cortland connection for Dio, because there's been a lot of Dio stuff in the news lately. I can't do his estate. I mean, since that guy's died, I mean, other than Jimi Hendrix, I don't know if anybody could release more posthumous releases than Ronnie James Dio. There's like something out every other week. Yeah, it's been pretty active. So, oh well. Well, listen,
this was fun.
Oh, this is a blast, man. As I said, I mean, this is very exciting. I'm glad we were able to make it happen. I said it's just been kind of a weird confluence of things coming together. I said when I ran across that vinyl record a few weeks, this is incredible, and I revisited a lot of this stuff. And then when I saw your name on the nominations, I said I gotta write something up. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. We'll be talking soon.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.